agreement in place between the Department of Justice and this witness. So if he's been immunized and you can't prosecute anyone for anything, where is the criminal liability to him coming and answering questions? Which further assumes that every question you ask is going to expose him to criminal liability. There is no Fifth Amendment privilege against answering non-incriminating questions.
Let me also inject here.
No, I have great respect for Mr. Lynch. I have asked what kind of a...
His attorney, Mr. Pagliano's attorney, says in his letter that he was given limited immunity for that purpose.
Well, that raises another interesting question that I hope the gentleman from Massachusetts will help me figure out, which is when you've reached an agreement with the government, oftentimes it includes cooperation with other entities within that same government. So I wonder whether the Department of Justice in their proffer or immunity agreement with Mr. Pagliano made it clear that he needed to cooperate with another branch of government. We can't prosecute anyone. Only the Department of Justice can, and they've made it, frankly, crystal clear they're not prosecuting anyone in this fact pattern. So where's the criminal liability?
The gentleman has constitutional rights under the Fifth Amendment. Whether they are violated by the FBI or violated here in Congress,
well,
still violated.
But as the gentleman from Massachusetts knows, the Fifth Amendment...
He cannot be required to be a witness against himself.
Right, but the Fifth Amendment doesn't protect you from non-incriminating answers.
Well, we've got a criminal referral here.
Not on him. He can say his name.
Sure it is.
He can say where he worked.
Sure
Every answer
it
doesn't
was issued
incriminate
the gentleman from Massachusetts will suspend. The gentleman from South Carolina.
Could I engage with the chair in a colloquy?
Yes.
I thought witness Pagliano was granted immunity.
That's what I've read.
Well, Congress can't prosecute anyone, so the one entity who can has granted him immunity. I'm trying to figure out what his criminal liability is.
If the gentleman would yield.
Well, I was having a colloquy with the chairman.
I understand
but if you can answer the question, I'll be happy to hear from you.
The FBI granted him limited immunity for the purpose
of... The FBI didn't grant him immunity. The Department of Justice granted him immunity.
That's correct. For that limited purpose.
How do you know it was limited use immunity? I haven't seen the immunity agreement.
Will the gentleman yield?
Sure.
But he can incriminate himself we've issued a criminal referral here.
He's got immunity.
He doesn't have immunity. He doesn't have immunity. You
haven't seen the immunity agreement.
Look at it. If you want to read it yourself, it's from the gentleman's attorney. He's got limited immunity.
No, I'm going to need a more reliable source than a criminal defense attorney. I want to read the agreement itself. I want to read the agreement between the Department of Justice and this witness, and whether or not that agreement requires this witness to cooperate with other entities of government. That is commonplace. For them to say you can tell us the truth but you can't tell Congress makes no sense. That's all I want.
Okay, the gentleman will suspend. The committee should also be aware that the committee did send a subpoena to Mr. Pagliano to produce this immunity agreement. That was due today at 10 a.m., and he did not produce that as well. So he was under subpoena to not only have his presence here, but so that everybody on this panel can see this immunity agreement, which he supposedly has in his possession. Those documents were also subpoenaed by the committee, and he did not comply with that as well.
What we have done as a committee, and through you, on this referral, is put him under threat of criminal prosecution because of the issue that you're investigating. I understand that. But it puts him in jeopardy coming before this committee while that criminal referral is in existence. And I'm just saying, he's an American citizen. I know the Constitution gets in the way of this committee sometimes. Did the chairman issue a criminal referral on Mr. Pagliano?
When we heard that the FBI had not looked at anything that Secretary Clinton had testified under oath before Congress, we did give a referral. We issued it, but we don't know.
Here's my point. You issued a criminal referral for an individual, and then you asked him to come in here and testify before Congress. Let me clarify. That would require him to surrender his Fifth Amendment rights if you're referring him and putting him under threat of criminal prosecution and then asking him to come in here, that's not fair. And the immunity doesn't cover him because your referral for criminal prosecution came after the fact and beyond the limited purpose for which he was granted immunity, sir.
For them to say you can tell us the truth but you can't tell Congress makes no sense.
You are opposed to immigration of persons south of the border coming to the U.S.
No, that's absolutely not true. I
Well,
support
well, let me
legal
ask-
immigration,
well, let-
not illegal immigration.
Well, let me ask you this question. You realize that we have been struggling with comprehensive immigration reform for many years in this country, and it is politics that keeps us from doing it, correct?
No, I think that
You don't think it's politics?
I think that
keeps us
it's
from doing it?
enforcement of the law. You may be dealing it
Well,
from a
I mean, we're
political
talking
issue.
about changing the law so that we can have comprehensive immigration reform, but you are opposed to us doing that, correct?
The process, and I'll
Are you
share
opposed to us considering comprehensive
in the order
immigration
that you're
reform?
doing it, yes.
Okay,
That the
because you
border needs
prefer
to be
that there
secured
needs to be
first,
border-
and then you can address that issue after.
All right, and that's a Republican position, Republican Party position, and you're a Republican, and I understand that. Let me ask you this question. Do you need automatic weapons to help you with border control?
We have in Arizona through the chair
If you could say yes or no, and then you could explain.
semi-automatic weapons.
Do you need automatic weapons?
We don't have to have automatic weapons, no.
Do you need mine-resistant, ambush-protected vehicles to help you patrol the border?
Not for the border, but for our SWAT team, yes.
Thank you. Do you need silencers in order to help you patrol the border?
For our SWAT team, that's a tactical move, but it's not necessarily targeted
Why does
for
your SWAT
smuggling.
team need mine-resistant, ambush-protected vehicles?
Because, sir, through the chair, our county doesn't have the money to buy a SWAT vehicle.
Why do you need it in order to enforce border security? Why do you need a mine-resistant, ambush-protected
We don't.
vehicle?
And this is
so
where...
Thank you. And do you need...
No, sir. Sheriff, you may answer the question. You cannot ask a question and then not allow the witness to answer it.
Mr.
Sheriff,
Chairman,
you
I
may
wanted a
answer.
yes or no answer. He answered the question, and I'm ready to move on.
Sheriff, have you
Now,
answered the
if some-
question as completely as you would like to?
Mr. Chairman, I'm
The
ready
gentleman
to
is
move
not
on.
recognized. Sheriff, have you answered the question as completely as you
And
would
this
like
is
to?
where us in
Mr.
law
Chairman,
enforcement...
regular order, please. Regular order.
In law enforcement, we have
Point of
420,000 residents of my county, and we are the SWAT team for
Point of
all
information,
13
Mr.
law
Chairman.
enforcement agencies. And for high-risk warrants, barricade
Chairman.
situations, almost never have we used
Chairman.
an armored vehicle for anything to
Point
do
of order.
with illegal immigration, Mr. Chairman.
Point of order, Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman.
Sheriff. The gentleman is out of time. If you have another question,
I have a point of order that I'd like to
state your
raise.
point of order.
Is it within the rules of this committee that the chairman can interrupt a legislator asking a question of a witness?
If that
Take
legislator
that
is not
legislator's
allowing a
time?
witness to answer a question, you daggum right he can.
The gentleman from South Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Department of Justice, Mr. Chairman, is not just another agency within the federal government. The Department of Justice is responsible for safeguarding the fundamental foundation of this republic, which is respect for the rule of law. The department is symbolized, Mr. Chairman, by nothing more than a blindfolded woman holding a set of scales and a sword. She doesn't care about political agendas. She doesn't care about whether her decisions help or hurt people's reelection bids. She doesn't care about race, gender, socioeconomic status, just the equal application of the law so all citizens can have confidence in the decisions that she makes. So it is against that backdrop, Mr. Chairman, that we look at the facts surrounding this investigation. Fast and Furious was fundamentally flawed in its conception, flawed in its execution, and flawed in its explanation afterward. And this is not, Mr. Chairman, as was initially the administration mantra, an Arizona investigation. Senior level officials within the Department of Justice in Washington knew about Fast and Furious well before Special Agent Brian Terry was murdered. Senior level DOJ officials were briefed. They discussed press conference opportunities. They discussed the unsealing of indictments. They traded emails about the status of the case. They approved wiretap applications, and most significantly, Mr. Chairman, they actively discussed the tactic of gun walking well in advance of Special Agent Brian Terry's murder and well in advance of a demonstrably false letter being written to a committee of Congress that was calculated to deceive and mislead. And here's the proof. Here, Mr. Chairman, is the proof that Department of Justice in Washington, not Arizona, in Washington, knew about the tactic of gun walking well before Brian Terry was murdered. So we have a fundamentally flawed federal investigation. We have a dead Border Patrol agent. We have hundreds of dead Mexican citizens, thousands of weapons with America's fingerprints on both sides of the border unaccounted for, and a demonstrably false letter being written to a committee of Congress, and yet we're being asked for more time. Please wait. Give it more time. It's been over a year, Mr. Chairman. If Congress has time to look into Major League Baseball, the BCS, and invite Stephen Colbert to come to a committee hearing, surely to goodness we have time to get answers on a fundamentally flawed, lethal investigation like Fast and Furious. And thus we have, Mr. Chairman. We embarked on an investigation to get answers to some pretty fundamental questions that I still cannot answer. When I'm asked back in South Carolina, who within Maine Justice approved this investigation, I can't give them an answer. When I'm asked who knew about gun walking and did nothing to stop it, I can give them this, but this is part of the answer because it's part of the documents. How did the demonstrably false letter get written on Department of Justice letterhead and delivered to a United States senator? I can't tell you how that letter got drafted. Why was it withdrawn after 10 months? Why did it take 10 months to withdraw the letter? Why was the criminal chief, to my friend Pat Meehan's point, why was the criminal chief of the Department of Justice in Mexico advocating for gun walking on exactly the same day that this demonstrably false letter was delivered to a committee of Congress? Can anyone answer that question? Can you tell me why Lanny Brewer was in Mexico advocating for a tactic that we all acknowledge is flawed on the very same day the Department of Justice was denying the tactic to Senator Chuck Grassley? Not only does Congress have a right to ask these questions, we have a fundamental duty to ask these questions. Our fellow citizens, the ones we're supposed to work for, when they get a jury summons, do you think they have a choice on whether or not to comply? When they get a subpoena from a law enforcement agency, do you think our fellow citizens get to offer an extraordinary accommodation in lieu of providing the documents? Either Congress has the authority to send a subpoena and require full compliance, or what we have been doing for the past 12 months is a fool's errand. And we never should have discussed contempt of Congress. Either we have the right to the documents and we should get all of them, or we have no business here. And with respect to executive privilege, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to resist the temptation to contrast Senator Obama's position on executive privilege with President Obama's position on executive privilege, but I would just note the juxtaposition is stark. If he was not part of the drafting of the February 4th letter, if he did not know about Fast and Furious before Brian Terry was murdered, if he did not approve of the wiretap applications, then what in the world is he asserting executive privilege for? He's either part of it or he's not. If he's part of it, then we've had a series of witnesses that have misled this committee. And if he's not part of it, then he's got no business asserting executive privilege, and I would yield back.
Mr. Chairman, I would just simply say this. There's been a lot of discussion this morning about wide receiver, about previous administrations. Mr. Chairman, let me be very clear. Bring them all. Bring everybody before this committee. Anyone who has information about gun walking, bring the information before the committee, because gun walking is wrong no matter what administration does it. So bring the Republicans and bring the Democrats and bring the Bull Moose Party and bring the Whigs. Bring them all. But that does not mitigate this Attorney General's responsibility to comply with a subpoena from Congress. Those are two separate issues, Mr. Chairman. What happened? Let's get all the information. To all of our colleagues who want to blame the Bush administration for everything that has gone wrong in this country, give them their day. But that does not mitigate this Attorney General's responsibility to comply with the law. And I'll say this in conclusion, Mr. Chairman. Like my friend Pat Meehan from Pennsylvania, as a former prosecutor, this is a sad day. For someone who worked for the Department of Justice, I hasten to add, in a Democrat administration, this is a sad day, but it is a necessary day. The notion that you can withhold information and documents from Congress, no matter whether you're the party in power or not in power, is wrong. Respect for the rule of law must mean something irrespective of the vicissitudes of political cycles. I thank my gentleman, my friend from Florida, and I yield back. And the part that galls me the most is the hypocrisy of GSA not even following its own damn rules. You are so quick to make everyone else follow the rules, and you can't follow your own rules. You have an event planner on staff. That'll come as quite a surprise to most taxpayers. What will come as even more of a surprise is the fact that you didn't even use them. You paid somebody else to plan the event despite the fact that you have event planners at taxpayer salary. And the scouting trips. You know, Mr. Chairman, the tribes of Israel sent 12 scouts into the Promised Land before they decided to invade, and GSA has to send 15 to Las Vegas to check out a hotel. Do you not see the outrage in that, Mr. Robertson? Do you see it?
Absolutely. This conference was outrageous.
Well, I'm not going to be as self-congratulatory as some other people are. I think the fact that we're having a hearing is a loss. Most people don't need a hearing to know that you don't spend other people's money the way that money was spent at this conference. We don't need a list of recommendations from the Inspector General. We don't need to be reminded that you can't negotiate a discount on a purse because the U.S. government decided to contract with a hotel. That is criminal. And a mind reader? My guess is they will not need a mind reader to find out the American public has lost confidence in the institutions of government. And the response, I want indictments, Mr. Inspector General. That's a great way to get people's attention, an indictment. Not a memo, not corrective measure, an indictment. I went through your report and I wrote 25 times, what's the penalty? What's the penalty for doing what you found that they did? What is the penalty for negotiating a discount on a purse for your personal use
because you work for the government and you steered work. What's the purpose? What's the penalty for tipping off a competitor of another bid? That sounds remarkably criminal to me, Mr. Inspector General.
Is a Republican plan to suppress the vote. Her theory, I guess, is that you're trying to get the Attorney General of the United States and that he is aggressively going out there fighting a suppression of the vote. Your response to that?
Well, you know, my friend Alan West said the race card was the last card in the deck. I think former Speaker Pelosi has opened up a new deck and has found the two of clubs. I could not believe it when I heard her saying that. Is that all you have to come back with? Is that the best you can come up with? Is that we got together in this grand scheme to suppress votes? And I'm sure she didn't say southern states, but that's what she meant. It's really beneath the office of a member of Congress to say something that outrageous, and the fact that she was once the speaker is mind-numbing. I honestly, and I've heard a lot in my 16 years as a prosecutor, I couldn't believe the words coming out of her mouth. But keep in mind, Greta, this is the same woman who said that she could have arrested Karl Rove any day she wanted. So I don't know what was wrong with her yesterday or today or whenever she said that, but I would